Welcome to the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions. My name is Kimberly Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director. And we're so honored to have a panel of our leaders in the community sharing their time and talent after such a strong legislative session. And we're going to have our first wrap up, and we're excited to hear what they have to say and learn from them. We invite you to put your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to honor them. Before I introduce our panelists and before we introduce our moderator for today, I'd like to share a little bit about what the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions is. It is a think tank that was created by Congressman Bill Young as a way to connect the community for social, political, and economic issues and talk in a nonpartisan manner to understand the appropriate and proper scope of government at the local, regional, state, and national level. So today we are most honored to have this panel of experts to engage in this type of discourse. With that, I'd like to introduce our own St. Petersburg College, Eric Eady, who has graciously agreed to do the beginning of the introductions for Albert Albie Kaminsky, and I hope I said that right. And we will go from there. So if you will please kindly put Erid's bio up.
Good afternoon. I'm Erid Eddy, the Government Relations Director for St. Petersburg College. Thank you very much, Kim, for the kind words. I'm happy to be here today for this great event, and I really want to extend my sincere appreciation to the members of our delegation who were able to attend today. You know, SPC had a very successful session this year, and that wouldn't have been possible without our delegation's support. So we are incredibly thankful to have such an engaged delegation, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Especially in a year with so much uncertainty, it's refreshing to know that we will be able to continue to provide a quality education and workforce training to our students and our community. I now have the pleasure of introducing someone I've known for many years. We were actually colleagues together in the legislature and have now moved into similar roles in different sectors. So he's the Director of Government Relations for Charter Communications and was recently recognized in Influence magazine as a rising star in Florida politics. Please welcome your moderator for today, Albie Kaminsky.
And Albie, you're gonna have to unmute yourself, but thank you.
I was just saying, you would think by 2021, it's now been 13 months since the beginning of this, since the Zoom marathons, and this technology is still kicking my butt.
Thank you. We look forward to it.
Well, and Kim, thank you so much for the introduction there. And you did say it right. Again, Albert is a family name. My dad is 6'6". He's Big Al. And my grandpa is 6'4". He's the biggest Al, and I'm Albie. I'm only 5'10". So there's where it all comes into play here. But Erin, thank you for the kind introduction here too. It's good to see you. Again, this has been an interesting year. Again, a lot of great public policy was passed in this 2021 legislative session, but it's been a little different not being able to see good friends and colleagues like you. And again, I'm excited to be here, and thank you again for the introduction and the opportunity to moderate here today. So as we move forward, it will be a standard, kind of a question and answer period. We're going to have about 5 questions for all of our elected officials to answer today. Before we get into the format of this, I'd like to just introduce all of our elected officials and our participants today in alphabetical order. First, we have Senator Jeff Brandes, again, a lifelong resident of St. Pete, the senior member so far. I think he's now got one more legislative session before terming out here in the Florida Senate, but was first elected into the Florida House of Representatives in 2010, and then elected into the Florida Senate in 2012. A very firm advocate for our region and obviously our city, but nationally recognized as a policy leader in the area of autonomous vehicles and mobility, flood insurance, and criminal justice reform. So that is a little bit about Senator Brandes. Next, we have Representative Linda Cheney. Representative was born in New York and lives in St. Pete Beach. She is newer to the Florida legislature this year in the Florida House of Representatives. She earned a bachelor's degree in communications from USF, and her career experience includes as a marketing director with Home Shopping Network. Representative Cheney also co-founded the Tampa Bay Mobile Mangry and served on the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. Next, we have Representative Nick DeSigli, going into his now just finished up with his third year sophomore term in the Florida legislature. Grew up in New York and then now came over here to Florida, and we're excited to have any transplants from New York to come into Florida. Let's keep those, let's keep that "we are open" signs still available here, because we love having members coming from all areas of the state, from New York, California, Texas. Again, that's the only way that Florida is going to continue to drive our economy, and with good elected officials like this. So Representative DeSigli owns his own business too, solar sanitization, since 2001. He was elected, like we said, into the Florida House in 2018 and again in 2020. Next, we have Senator Ed Hooper, another longstanding public servant here in the Tampa Bay region, hailing out of the northern part of Pinellas County, elected to the Florida Senate in 2018, but also served a full 8 years in the Florida House of Representatives from 2006 to 2014. He was a member of the Clearwater City Commission from 1996 to 2000, and again, an all-around great statesman for the region and for the state. Another, as everybody likes to say, freshman member, but again, they're not freshmen anymore after coming through, after serving this first term here. Representative Rayner, a great champion for the area as well, newly elected. Representative Michelle Rayner hails from the St. Petersburg area. Also, she serves in House District 70. She made history by becoming the first open LGBTQ woman of color in the Florida legislature. Her history of service and community spans more than a decade. Again, an overall great person in the Florida legislature. Hit the ground running that first session, and look forward to hearing a little bit more about your perspective, Representative Rayner. Finally, we're going to wrap it up with Senator Darrell Rouson. Again, another longstanding public servant and staple within the Tampa Bay region, but specifically here in Pinellas County. Senator Rouson has earned his reputation as a trailblazer in the business community, and in 1981, he became the first African-American prosecutor in Pinellas County. As we said earlier, for Senator Brandes, as we were talking a little bit about him and his passion for criminal justice reform, I also like to look at Senator Rouson as another champion for criminal justice reform. He was recently, in 2016, elected into the state Senate, previously served in the state House. His district right now includes portions of Pinellas and Hillsborough County, but Senator Rouson began his tenure in the Florida legislature and has regularly been listed as one of Tampa Bay's most influential politicians. All right, so there's a quick little introduction of our elected officials. And Kim, do you want me to say a few words before jumping into our questions that we have prepared for our panelists today?
I would definitely say just ask them what they want to share about the session, or particularly what they're interested in sharing with our participants, and then jump right in.
Fantastic. Well, I think we could start with, and I'll think for the structure of this, we'll go in seniority too, and then starting with the Senate, and then moving our way, snake our way questions down to the House members. So we'll have everybody have an opportunity to ask to answer this question. We should have about 4 or 5 questions for everybody to kind of go through, but we'll start off with just overall perspective of how everybody thought this Florida legislative session went. Specifically, again, this is, I hate to say this because everybody's been talking about this over the past 5 months as we've been up there. But a lot of people are branding this as the COVID session, right? It's been a little bit different for staff, for elected officials, for lobbyists entering into the business, for associations and constituents trying to visit. Tell us a little bit about your perspective of this session and this legislative session, and what we can expect moving forward here too. So Senator Brandes, I think we have you on here. Do you want to start us off?
I'm happy to. So I would say that this was a session that I would never want to redo again. One of the best parts of session really is the human interaction, and we don't get that when the building is closed, and so it really takes away from the experience, both for the public, but frankly for the legislators. Without the human interaction, this is just work. We're just powering through bills and reading, and I'd come back to the office and read, but you need things to break that up, and you miss out on the serendipity of the process. You hear things in the hallways, you're talking to people on the sidebar when you're in the Capitol. So, to me, it's a session that I'm glad is over with. I think there was a lot of policy that made it through, a lot I didn't agree with this year, even being I'm a more libertarian Republican. I thought there was a lot of challenging issues that I just disagreed with. But I think on the main, if you take away the handful of very controversial bills, I think there was a lot of good policy that made it through.
Thank you, Senator. We'll now move on to Senator Rouson. And Senator, again, this is the pot calling the kettle black here, but I think you're on mute as well.
I resent that you called me black.
Good to see you, Senator.
Funny you called it the COVID session, because instead of doing issues that dealt with COVID, we dealt with anti-protesting, we dealt with elections, we didn't deal with unemployment for the people, and those are things that we could have done. Senator Brandes is right. We missed the interaction, not only of the public coming in, sharing their ideas of policy, but with lobbyists coming in and educating us on different issues also. But in spite of that, this was a good budget year, thanks to our federal partners and the American CARES dollars that came down. I think this was the largest budget in the history of the state. Many projects got funded, but more importantly, the environment was helped with environmental bills, resiliency, sustainability took a forefront, and those were very positive things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Senator. On to our final Senator participant here, Senator Hooper. Are you with us today?
I'm here, Albie. I am. Thank you very much. It's good to see all of you again. It's obviously Senator Brandes, Rouson, and I are on a shaving strike. None of us have had time to shave since session was over. I agree wholeheartedly with the two previous statements by Senator Brandes and Rouson. I miss the public input and exchange of ideas. I have long said for my many years, there is nobody in the legislature knows everything about everything. And it's always good to be able to go find one advocate and one opponent, at least on every issue, and try to get what is real, what is reality, and base your discussion and your votes based on what should be the right answer. But as of last Friday, the Capitol is back open. There are no more, we all had to have a weekly test to get ourselves in the Capitol. Those are over, no masks, no social distancing. But I'm assuming we'll still, be semi-smart about it as we all go back actually next week for a special session now and get ready for the 2022 session. But I miss the public input. I miss that exchange probably more than anything. My focus tended to be more on tourism and transportation and economic development. That's the policy areas and the funding areas that I tended to concentrate on, but I look forward to the questions. I look forward to hearing from our House counterparts.
Senator, that's a great observation on the beards. I like that too. and a great transition into our House members here. So we'll start off with you, Representative DeSigley. Tell us a little bit about your experience within this legislative session and how it's differed from your other 2 years here and serving in the legislature.
There we go. It's
You
great
did
to
that on
be with
purpose,
everybody.
didn't you?
Yeah, I know, it's a damn mute button. It's great to be with everybody. I appreciate the opportunity. I always enjoy these legislative wrap-ups. Yeah, it was a different experience in the House. I mean, we were able to, have lobbyists and folks like that come to our offices and spend some time with us on issues that they're advocating for. Obviously, even in committee, we were able to have the folks come in to the committee rooms and give their testimony. For me personally, it was, obviously I'm in my second term. I had the opportunity and privilege of chairing the Insurance and Banking Subcommittee. So when you go from, your freshman term where you're just trying to learn the process, you're trying to, not make fatal political mistakes. Once you get past that, and then you have the responsibility of chairing a subcommittee, especially, one that deals with, insurance and banking, but specifically, property insurance, I think was probably the biggest issue that we dealt with, in our subcommittee. It's really just kind of learning that part of the process. And I will tell you, rewind to the last Wednesday before session, was when I finally got one of my last bills off the House floor. It was like this incredible feeling of relief and weight off my shoulders because, once I was named, chair of the subcommittee, all the way up until, a couple of days before the end of session, that pressure builds, bills are moving, you have multiple different responsibilities. But I will say overall, I think we had a very productive legislative session. I think when you look at the budget and where we were a year ago, we were looking at, $5.5 billion shortfall. Obviously that didn't happen. We have a record-breaking budget. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that our economy has been open for, almost a year. I think just about a year now. I think my wife and I celebrated our anniversary last week, and I remember going out to dinner for the first time in 2 months, a year ago, May. So our economy has been open the last year. I think certainly that's had a positive impact on our budget. So I think overall it was an exciting session. It was, it never has its dull moments, that's for sure. But I'm certainly happy to be back home and looking forward to answering any questions you all might have.
Never has any dull moments indeed. It was definitely an action-packed session. So Representative Rayner, if it's okay, we'll pivot on over to you and share a little bit about your perspective of this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you, Albie. Good to see my colleagues. This session was interesting. I served in the Senate as an aide to former State Senator Athenia Joyner, so it's definitely interesting and exciting being on the other side as a member. So we kind of, to Senator Roussan's point, it was the COVID session. However, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more focus on some unemployment issues, a little bit more focus on some COVID strategies for the working people. But it was also exciting in the sense that I passed 2 bills as a freshman and got, with the help of a lot of people on this call, stuff in the budget as well. So I think that you have to, one of the things that I've learned just when I was an aide, now as a member, that we are really lucky to be in a position to be able to come back and be able to work on things and continue working on things. And then you had members pass bills that said, listen, I've been working on this for 3-4 years and we finally got it across the finish line. So also having that understanding that just because we may not see something in this particular session does not mean we won't be able to get it across the finish line. So it was a good session. It's definitely challenging. I would love to have more of the human interaction of the people in the Capitol, but it was good for the elevators. So that's good. But other than that, look forward to answering questions and look forward to hearing from the folks here on the call.
Yeah, I bet you guys were getting used to those new elevators and not having to wait at all and getting down to session in 2 minutes and not having everybody pulling you in all these different directions before getting to the floor. Things must have been nice. Well, no, in all seriousness, thank you, Representative Rader. And then we'll pivot over to our final participant here today, Representative Cheney.
Hi, thank you. Well, the only experience I have to compare this to is as a city commissioner. And at local government, very different than state government at this level, the way things were happening. Very exciting process. I heard from many groups, special interests, lobbyists, by phone, by Zoom. So I did not feel that we were missing any information. Having said that, I don't know what happens in the hallways with all the people because, you know, I haven't had that experience. So that'll be new for me next session. My takeaway on this, and I've been asked this a couple of times, and my takeaway is I thought, one, predominantly we were extremely efficient. This session was very, very efficient. The amount of bills, I think there were over 3,000 filed and, you know, over 250 that got into law that I would agree with Rep. DeSaegli were good bills. And it was a very efficient process. It was a pro-business process, well balanced with really important environmental issues. And that's a real priority for me. That's really important to me that we balance business with the environment. And I felt that we did a really good job of that. $2 billion are earmarked for our environment right now. Education got increased funding. I think that's really foundational to the future of our economy and our state. So you know, some really important areas I think that we focused on and got taken care of. My focus real strongly was for funding for my district. Being on the beaches, District 69, we've got roads and sewer issues and lots of financial needs around that. So I was really happy that I got those projects funded. We even got a waterfront park. All of that sitting on the governor's desk. So far, so good. And one of my bills was part of one of the largest resiliency packages ever in the state of Florida, addressing sea level rise in a really significant way. That's a bill that's going to be going to the voters in 2022. So the legislature adopted it, and next it goes to the voters. And we're addressing sea level rise head on at the local levels and at the state level. As a freshman, I've had 5 bills are on the governor's desk and over $5 million are also on his desk. So I feel that I personally was very productive. I'm told for a freshman, that's amazing. So I'll agree that I felt personally very productive, and I think our legislature was very productive. And I look forward to getting back next session and hit the ground running even faster than we did this session.
I'll start with one of the questions that was presented in the chat. And for the entire leadership, I'd like you to know that there are questions not only in the chat, but also in the Q&A that you all have access to. Again, to our participants, we're not going to get to every question, but we're certainly going to try. So the first one that was submitted, and it was pre-submitted, the question is regarding housing. There seems to be a trend toward eroding home rule where decisions, and it keeps jumping, so my apologies, to make sure that we can get all this. And decisions are made closer to where people live, their home communities. How can cities more effectively communicate the critical importance of home rule and addressing local perspectives in areas like impact fees and home business? Senator Brandes, are you okay taking this one?
Sure, I have no problem taking this one. So first of all, I really have some issues with how Florida does affordable housing. And I really wish we would just take the money and turn it into a block grant and send it back down to the counties. I think that's the most effective, efficient way we can deal with the funds that we get up here for affordable housing. It gets the bureaucracy, at least at the state level, out of it, allows locals to better tailor it to their own communities. As far as impact fees and other things go, as far as limiting the amount of housing stock in communities, it's really a it's really a challenging issue because it's very easy for current residents to say, listen, we're going to make all the new residents fund everything else in our county, all the new projects in our county. Even though they've lived there and many of them paid no impact fees when they originally moved in. And so, we've seen some impact fees as high as $30,000 or $40,000, which when you annualize that over a term of a 30-year mortgage could be $100,000 or more in additional cost to the homeowner over time. And so I think it's all about striking the right balance, making sure that the impact fees are actually going towards things that have been impacted. And not that they're holding them in reserve for some future expense, or they're using and diverting the funds to some other issue. We've seen all of that happen in the past. Look, there's going to be a yin and yang as it relates to affordable housing impact fees. I think the thing we have to realize is we have 800 people moving to Florida every single day. That we're going to have more housing in order to support that. It's going to have to look like a combination of things. It can't just be single family homes. It's got to be apartments and workforce housing as well. And it's all about finding the right mix for your community.
The next question was regarding, it was from Healthy Start Coalition of Pinellas. And the question was essentially for any, what was your motivation for supporting postpartum Medicaid extension to 12 months and support Healthy Start services to pregnant women and infants this session? So Senator Rouson, if you want to jump in, and if not, if any of our delegation could respond to that question. And then Albie, you can just jump in from there. Questions are being placed in both the chat and the Q&A. For our participants, we would prefer that you put them in the Q&A if possible. Thank you so much.
I'll defer that question.
Senator Brandes, I see you jumping back on here.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a piece of that. Look, I think it's the right thing to do. What we know is we want to be with moms in that first year. A portion of this bill is really talking about birth control during that first year after postpartum. One of the best things we can do for new moms, especially moms who are immediately postpartum, is give them options so that they can spread out pregnancies. What tends to happen, especially in a Medicaid population, is you have back-to-back pregnancies, and that tends to be negative for both the mom and for potentially the kids, especially that second or third child that can be born back to back. And so by allowing Medicaid for that full first year, we can have additional conversations with that mom about potentially spreading out those pregnancies. We're not saying don't have kids. We're just saying think about the timing of those and as it relates to the science. And what the science says is to the extent that you can spread them out, you're likely going to be better off. Now, obviously that might not work if you're older, but typically for younger moms who are having, kids, 8, 9, 10, well, not 9, 10, 12 months apart, that can be a real challenge and can lead to lower birth weights in the second child.
Do you mind if I jump in on that? So I actually sat on the full Health and Human Services committee. And so the first two, and Public Health and Professions committee as well. So our first 2 to 3 committee meetings was really dealing with the issue of maternal health, really dealing with the issue of what can we do as a legislature to ensure that moms have, remain healthy after they give birth, also make sure that children, they remain healthy, that there's not issues with mortality after they give birth. And one of the ways that all the doctors and the experts that we had, many from our area, one of the ways that they said was to ensure that mothers would be able to have access to Medicaid that would be expanded, or health insurance that would be expanded to about at least 12 to about 18 months after postpartum. So that was really some of the impetus that we saw during this particular session. And then also the speaker working with Representative Camilla Brown, they and Chair Burton and so many others kind of formulated this policy. And so what we love is that it's expanding Medicaid in a way that's actually going to make a very real difference in many, many people's lives.
Fantastic. Thank you, Representative. Anybody else? If not, we'll jump into another question that we were talking a little bit about before here. And I'm toggling through a couple of these here, trying to not be too repetitive, but I am sensing a main theme here, and Senator Rouson or Senator Brandes, I think would like to probably jump in and say, why are legislators so hesitant to address prison reform?
Well, that's a very good question, because criminal justice, we thought this was going to be a very big year for criminal justice reform. In fact, it was a watered down year when it comes to police reform and overall criminal justice reform. We thought there would be a more sensitive response to the summer of riots, the summer of protests, both locally and nationally. But there's not been the appetite in the legislature for real criminal justice reform. You know, we tried again this year to reduce 85% truth in sentencing down to 65%. It would have saved over $700 million of people being incarcerated, released early, who probably deserve to be released early. We tried to come back at reducing minimum mandatory sentences that don't fit the crime. But this was not a good year for that. In fact, HB1, the anti-protest bill, sailed through the legislature, and I think it was the first bill signed by the governor. And it was a crackdown on free speech. You know, this is a leadership issue.
Senator Brandes, you care to chime in?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think you have to realize that criminal justice policy is by far the most difficult area of public policy to work on. Largely opposed by the Florida Sheriff's Association and many major, any of the major provisions that we've talked about today, especially the ones Senator Rouson talked about. If you think about it, Florida incarcerates about 73,000. That's our COVID, our post-COVID number. Before that, we were about in the 80,000 to, we've been as high as 100,000. People incarcerated in Florida's correctional institutions. But what we can't do right now is hire good correction staff. In fact, we should just rename the Department of Corrections the Department of Warehousing, because essentially that's what we do. We warehouse people. And so I think there's a concerted effort by many legislators to begin to change that. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a much longer time frame than I think Senator Rouson and the rest of us on this panel would like to think about. But it's going to happen. It's unsustainable that we stay in this current trajectory. We have to have a correction system that's really truly focused on public safety and not just about punishment, which is what essentially not essentially, but what the statute says it's for today, that our criminal punishment code is there to punish. We think it should be focused on public safety, and we should be allocating our resources to things that improve public safety and things that allow for us to review sentences. Because at the end of the day, the sentence that you're handed, while it may be appropriate when it was first given, it may not be appropriate 10 or 20 years into the sentence, where you're a completely different person and completely reformed. And so we should allow for second looks on those types of things. We should do what Senator Rouson has been fighting for years now, which is to let's retroactively apply some of the laws that the legislature has changed over time. For example, ag assault went from almost a 10-20 life kind of a issue to a third-degree felony, which carries 5 years. So you could have committed the same crime. Somebody could be serving 20 years in the cell next to you that did the exact same crime. They just did it 2 years apart because the legislature went and changed the law. But really, we should be focusing on really 3 areas: diversion whenever possible, and then focus on the criminal justice, the prison system itself, and then finally on reentry. Today in Florida, for reentry, you get $50 in a bus pass. Nobody thinks that's the right way to do it. Other states are really leading the way. Florida should follow their lead and take the best practices from around the country.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, because I know that was a major theme of a lot of the questions coming in through the Q&A function here too. But I kind of wanted to pivot back to some of our members here in the Florida House that I think that they could probably chime in on a little bit too. And it's more from a procedural standpoint, just for some of the constituents at home and citizens that were trying to follow along with the process. Sometimes it's a little challenging to follow the amendments to the strikeout or the amendments to the amendments. Can you tell us a little bit, and I'll start off with you, Representative Rayner. Some people almost observed that there were a lot more amendments and strikeouts than what they would see as normal here too. But can you tell us a little bit about just the procedural process of going through committees and how a bill is thoroughly vetted?
Definitely, and thank you so much for that question. And where a lot of people saw a lot of the amendments and the strikeouts was really when we were on the House floor. We had structured debate this year, so we had a certain amount of time to ask questions and a certain amount of time to debate the actual bill. So as a strategy in the minority party is that we would file amendments. The amendment process, if you want to think a bill that's problematic, you want to make it a little bit better, especially if you know if it's going to pass. And also it's an ability for us to discuss, certain concerns we may have with a bill in the form of an amendment. So because structured debate limited us, then in years past, that was another way for us to draw out and bring attention to concerns that we may have, concerns good or bad, that we may have had with the bill.
Thank you, Representative. And Chair DeSigley, as a chairman to one of the committees, did you see an increase, decrease? How was the kind of the volume of amendments coming through some of the committees here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we didn't really experience that, in such an extensive manner as you get towards the bigger committees.
Mhm.
Typically, a bill has 3 committee stops. Banking and insurance and banking typically was the first stop. So in many areas, this is a member's first opportunity to present that bill. And then typically after that first committee stop, if there's an opportunity to address some concerns, to amend the bill, to address those concerns going to the next stop, that's typically how things obviously evolve. And yes, when you get to the House floor, especially, the last week of session, things are moving so quickly. The amendments are, the bills kind of grow. Some of the bills turn into trains, if you will, where bills that might have not made it through committee or, whatever the case might be, they'll be amended on to another bill. And then obviously that bill would become, a larger bill. It's just the nature of the legislative process. Obviously, you have to pay very close attention to that. I give my colleagues on the other side of the aisle a lot of credit for paying attention, because they certainly do. Again, it's just the nature of the beast. And, in my opinion, it's a process that works, and there's, several and many opportunities to improve a bill as it moves through the process. And I certainly, am a member that, I'd like to take advantage of those opportunities to improve, any piece of public policy moving through the process, because, at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to, present those bills, those vetted bills on the House floor as good as they can get. And, that's what the committee process is there for.
Yeah, and let me add to that, like Representative Cheney says, 3,000 bills get filed, maybe 250 make it through the process. And it's a shame that the 3rd largest state in the country still only has a 60-day session for us to try to amend, file, understand, read, and passionately argue and debate every bill that comes through. Every bill, sometimes we don't see a bill until it hits the floor because we don't serve on the committees that the bill has traveled through. So I've advocated for a long time. The 3rd largest state in this nation needs to have a bigger, better session.
Representative Cheney.
Hi, thank you. I have a slightly different perspective. When I saw a bill that I had some concerns about, I went to the bill sponsor and discussed my concerns, and very often the bill sponsor would file the amendments to address some concerns, which is exactly the way the process is supposed to work. That's what all the committees are for. That's what all of our interaction is for. And I was particularly pleased with there was a pedestrian safety bill that had to do with Gulf Boulevard, which is a major road in both Rep. DeSeglia and I's district. And I had some very serious safety concerns about the bill. And when I went to the sponsor and explained that, he was willing to amend his own bill to address that. So, you know, I see the amendment process as a necessary process. I also would agree with Senator Rouson that, boy, you know, if you're not a speed reader and understander, this is a very fast pace. And yeah, there's a lot of things that, I mean, I would read it the night before it hit the floor, but I still would appreciate it a little bit more time. But, you know, that's the process we have right now. So, you know, just if you're going to run for office, you better be able to read fast and not get a lot of sleep.
Would, to Rep. Cheney's point, I would respectfully disagree. I think that dependent upon where you are stationed at in the House, I can't speak for the Senate, I'm not there. There's only certain ways that you're able to express concerns with the bill, and it doesn't always work for everyone, even if you go to the bill sponsor for it to be amended or addressed or taken seriously. So I think that you have both processes. You obviously start with the bill sponsor, and if you're not able to get anywhere with the bill sponsor, every member of the 120 body has a right to file an amendment if they feel that it's appropriate.
Awesome. So again, definitely a speedy process and a very complex process through these 60 days, as Senator Rouson highlighted here too. It's I've heard some people say it as 60 days of organized chaos, right? But at the end of the day, you all delivered. And actually, I'd like to pivot to one more thing that I was brought up a little bit in the Q&A, and some of you addressed it in your opening comments here. But that 60 days, at the end of the day, there was a lot of great policy that was passed over, Representative Cheney, like you said, to over 250 bills that are on their way over to the governor, if not some of them have already been signed. But the one provision in the Florida Constitution is that we pass a balanced budget, right? So I wanted to hear a little bit more specifically. I think I've seen some in the Q&A address a little bit about the environmental concerns. Did we address that properly in this legislative session? Was there room for improvement? Just knowing that we are here in, living here in Pinellas County, how did we? I'll start off with you, Representative Cheney, because I heard that you brought that up in your opening comments. Here to address any of the environmental concerns or the budget at large.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do, because that's a big focus of mine, being on the beach, and a lot of my district on the beach. We had the largest statewide flooding and sea level rise resiliency package passed ever in the state of Florida. One piece of it is $100 million to mitigate the impact of flooding and sea level rise that goes right to the local communities for them to address flooding and sea level rise in their regions. Another piece of it is to homeowners, to incent them to raise their properties out of the way of flooding, and long-term reduce our flood insurance. We funded Forever Florida again to purchase environmental lands. We put $2 billion into Everglades restoration and water projects, springs, stormwater, wastewater, resiliency projects. I think the legislature led by Senate President and our Speaker Sprowls, Senate President Wilton Simpson, and our Speaker Sprowls we're very focused on resiliency and addressing sea level rise and what we can do about it. And that is not mutually exclusive to ongoing research of causes, and that's a whole separate issue. What the legislature did this year is rolled up our sleeves and brought real solutions to the table and funded these solutions that are short-term and long-term to protect the residents and to protect our communities, to protect our infrastructure, and to allow the state to grow. With the 1,000 residents, a day, 800 to 1,000 residents a day that are coming in, we're having to address that growth from an impact, from infrastructure, from our communities, our roads that are below sea level. We've got issues that we have to dig out of today and in the future. And I was really pleased with the focus that we put on that. We've got short-term and long-term plans in place and funding in place, and we've taken it very seriously.
Thank you, Representative Cheney. And if I may, you hit on a great point here too that I'd like to pivot on over to Senator Hooper, who served as Vice Chair for the Tourism and Economic Development Appropriations Subcommittee here over in the Senate. So I know that you've been a champion for that over in the Senate too. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of came through your silo this year?
Thanks, Albie. And chairing Commerce and Tourism in the policy area, and then Vice Chair of the Appropriations world of those similar issues. This past year our economy has been in chaos, and as Representative Cheney happens to live in paradise and represent that part of the world, as does Senator Brandes and Senator Rouson and myself, tourism is still our #1 industry. And that's the economy that has to return to as robust as it can be to get Florida's economy back to not only where it was, but better than what it was. And we're making those strides. And one of my priorities this year was keeping Visit Florida alive and well and funded. And you've heard several times that 800 to 1,000 people a day are moving to Florida. Well, yes, they all want to live on the water. And speaking of water, every one of those people has to have water to drink and bathe and to survive. And that's going to be, to me, one of the next big things that this state's going to have to deal with. And we started this year in our resiliency discussions about, the day's coming where we will drink water that may have been used for other purposes in a prior life of its own, and that could be reclaimed water. We can't just keep digging new wells or building desal plants, but they're still coming, and we got to keep them a job. We still want to invite not only the 22 million that live here. We're anticipating way north of 100 million out-of-state visitors annually to come here and spend their money and to enjoy what Florida offers. So tourism to me and making commerce and tourism go hand in hand is extremely important. I think all of us will have our same committee assignments this next session at least. And so as our economy returns to as normal as it can be, we still have to focus on making that part of our #1 industry come back to where it was, while understanding water and septic to sewer, all of those things that make Florida better can't be ignored as we deal with everything else in the state.
I'd like to say, first of all, thank you, but I would like your final thoughts. I'm going to take executive privilege here because I don't think my comments are as important as your comments. This is an opportunity for people to hear from you. And so if you all would say final words, and then we'll just close with the screen of our next program, which is May 24th with AARP. It's an intergenerational food issue. I also want to thank you all on behalf of our community. I've seen you all work in community aspect issues that impact us here at home. And we appreciate, regardless of anyone's ideology, how you fight for our county. So thank you so much. And with that, Senator Brandes, if you'll just go and we'll just do a round robin and then we'll end there. Thanks.
Sure, happy to. So what I always tell people is when you're interested in working in public policy, you need to work on two key things. First, what's your vision? And two, who's your champion? And finding what our office tries to do, which is find the big idea in every area of public policy. So in transportation, we work on the world. We think the world's getting more shared, electric, and automated. And so we've put Florida into a leadership position in that. In the world of insurance, it's really fixing the property insurance so that Florida's property insurance world is affordable. In education, Florida's a leader in school choice and giving both parents and kids options that frankly, a decade ago, they just never had. And so as we go through the different areas of policy, we need to be focused on what is that big vision. And I think it's one of the areas where Florida's lagging the most is in the criminal justice reform space. And it's largely because we don't have a cohesive vision from the House and the Senate, and frankly, even amongst members themselves, about what the future of public safety and criminal justice needs to look like. That's an area that we're going to have to continue to work on. But in so many other areas, Florida really is leading the country. In that area, we're really a laggard in the country, and we've got to get better.
Thank you so much. Senator Hooper.
Thank you, Kim. And Senator Brandis is exactly right. It's 60 days goes fast, even though we're really in Tallahassee. All are parts of 5 or 6 months out of the year, but that 60 days is a magic time when bills are passed. Several things that we need to not lose sight of. We are still the third largest state in the country and growing. Thank goodness we have a constitutional requirement to pass a balanced budget. We look around at other states that are in, with the year we've just gone through, that are in woeful condition economically. They may never recover. So, it's all of us were told, all of us in the elected position were told 4 months ago, it's going to be really bad in the budget process. Please don't ask for anything. And as the economy started turning around and with help from the federal government, we passed the largest budget in Florida history, $101.5 billion. So there was opportunity to do some really meaningful things across the whole spectrum, whether it's healthcare was going to suffer incredible unfunded mandates that were previously funded. And as it turns out, everything will never get funded appropriately, but it was a dramatic turnaround. Education is, our state has gone from near the bottom to almost at the top in so many areas. And a couple of things that just, nobody's talked about, but let's look, for example, being a chairman is a pretty, it has some responsibility that goes with that. And I'm proud that a member of our delegation of the minority party, Senator Rouson, was honored to chair a committee in the Florida Senate this year. That speaks A, to Senator Rouson himself, and B, to the Senate President's trust in who Senator Rouson is. Senator Brandis had some tough assignments, especially in the criminal justice world, but Senator Brandis is still on this call, so he enjoys the last 2 weeks of amendment Armageddon. So you always have to watch. You always have to watch for a Senator Brandis amendment on your bill. But he keeps us on our toes. But he is an incredible advocate for this entire state in so many areas that are not flashy. They're not, they don't get you a headline in a newspaper, but they're darned important. And I'm proud to work with he and Senator Rouson both, and all of our House members. We are blessed to have, especially those of you that are freshmen. If next session goes back to normal, you will try to figure out what is going on in this zoo we call the legislative session, because you're going to be in, and you can't go to the restroom without being ushered in with somebody who wants just 10 seconds of your time. So I'm just proud of Kim and Albie, this program. I'm proud of what St. Pete College does, how they advocate on behalf of all Floridians. And I look forward to the next session and continuing the good work to get us back where Florida needs to be.
Thank you. We are honored to serve and hope that we can have you all come back a little bit more as your time permits. I want to get over to our representatives, and as we're closing, we'd like to say that we're going to stay on just a couple more minutes to make sure every representative is heard. And what we want to just hear is whatever is important to you as your outtake for this session. And for our participants who didn't get your questions specifically asked, we will send all these questions to them. Of course, it will be on their spirits to respond, but we will make sure at least they have the breadth of what's important to you from this session. Representative DeSigli.
Yes, thank you. It's really been great. Again, I echo the comments of my colleagues over in the Senate. You all do a great job, and I'm always going to be supportive of your efforts at St. Pete College. It's very important for our community and really for our state. I'll just say that, this is a time after session. It's a time for us, at least for me, to hear my constituents. What are the issues that they're concerned about? If there was an issue that, we moved through the legislative process, I want to know, kind of their thoughts on that, good, bad, or indifferent. But really, we're going to likely have committee week starting in the fall again. And so, now's the time to get some of these policy ideas and concerns that our constituents have. And I'm certainly looking forward to, speaking with them throughout the summer.
Thank you so much. I'd appreciate you holding on, Representative Rayner Gooseby. Please go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. I appreciate you, my sorority sister as well. So, coming back after session, just to Chair DeSigli's point, this is really a time to hear from constituents, especially in my district. They're concerned about how the voting bill is going to affect their ability to vote. They're concerned about HB1. They're concerned about unemployment. So really hearing from them and being able to come back to next session and really, find common ground with, the folks in the legislature and really begin to push forward issues and solutions rather that can benefit all of us. So I have, kind of taken a few moments to breathe, but, and we will be right back for a special session next week dealing with gaming. So we will be back, but then we will have the rest of the summer and a little bit of the fall to really make sure we drill down on things that matter to the people and make sure that we can give people common sense solutions to their issues, because I think the things that are important don't have a political party next to it. Education doesn't have a political party. Clean water doesn't have a political party. Housing does not. These are things that are all common to all of us. And I think that the most successful legislators I've seen are people that deal with those issues, solutions first, and all the other things later. So I'm grateful to be here, and thank you. I do have to hop, but I'm grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson and SBC, for the service that you render our community.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, certainly not least, Representative Cheney, thank you so much. And your passion for the environment was clear. Look forward to hearing your final comments.
Well, good. If I were to identify some needs that I think we have to continue to work on, we touched on them, but I think they're big issues that we'll just continue to chip away at, and that would be property and health insurance, including mental health. I think they're very big challenges. I think they're ongoing issues that the legislature will probably touch on maybe every single session, and maybe we need to. What I was really pleased with, and I'll repeat myself a little bit, is how well we balance the needs of our economy with the environment, because it is intertwined in Florida. We can't kill the golden goose, our environment. We won't have quality of life for our residents or our visitors. So, I continue to carry that flag to stimulate our economy, support our businesses. We have so many great small businesses out there, and to do everything we can to help them. And none of that can be done at the expense of the environment. So we keep that forefront for us. I think I'm very optimistic. I think Florida's on a good path, even though I do see we have some challenges in front of us with our growth. And finally, I'd like to thank my partners in the House. Rep. DeSigli helped me with the sexual predator bill, where we closed that loophole. Really important, making our community so much safer that predators have to register if they've been convicted of that crime. And I thank Rep. DeSigley for helping me with that. Senator Hooper, his constant encouragement of me, that was really appreciated. And Senator Brandis and I worked on the flood mitigation bills together. So as a freshman, I was really grateful and impressed with how well everyone came around and helped each other. And I would also echo Rep. DeSigley that I invite constituent feedback. We're here to represent you. You tell us what issues you have and you'd like us to discuss, and I would welcome that, and my door is open.
I like how you ended. Your door is open. I consider ISPS a safe space, and I'm honored to take on this mantle that Congressman Bill Young created. If you'd like to learn more about our thought process and what we do, please go to isps.spcollege.edu. I cannot thank again you all for your time. I know you came off of a really extremely busy session under less than desirable circumstances, and now you're here to come back. I know all questions are not easy questions, but I'm so grateful that you're here to facilitate them. Again, to our participants, thank you for joining us, and we will make sure that the entire video is posted along with the questions given to our legislative delegation. And again, thank you. Our final program for the month of May is really important. It's on intergenerational food insecurity, and it's being done in sponsorship with AARP. We hope you will join us for this important conversation. Again, ISPS is dedicated to social, political, and economic programs in a nonpartisan manner. And sometimes it's hard to fit the many topics that as a community we need to resolve together, but these are important discussions to have. I think one of you all said solutions first, and that's where I'll end. Again, thank you. For more, please go to isps.spcollege.edu and have a wonderful afternoon.